Hi guys, welcome to Origin. In this video I want to look at democracy. And no, at no other point in the video apart from right now am I going to use the phrase democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. Now if you spend any amount of time listening to what people say on the internet, in real life, wherever it might be, you're not going to find a lot of positive talk about that country's government. And it really doesn't matter what political view someone has. This goes right across the board. So it's worth considering, is it a problem amongst the major political parties, or is there something inherently wrong with the way our governments operate? And of course we need to take into account that these are just a handful of different ways to run a democracy. And we also need to consider that we might not have pure democracies. For example, lobbying can interfere with the function of a democracy. So in order for a democracy to work well, it occurs to me that it needs to possess the following traits. First of all, the people with voting power in a democracy have to be well informed. And when I say well informed, they need to know about the issues, they need to know the truth about what's going on and not, believe lies that have been fed to them. And therein lies the first problem. People aren't always logical. In fact, a lot of the time people believe things for purely emotional reasons. And if someone's emotionally invested in a position, it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to change their mind. Since that's an inherent problem with human beings, it must also be an inherent problem with democracy. The second point is that the voting process has to be fair. During the last American election, there was this huge discussion about the Electoral College and how unfair it was as a voting system. They worked out that you could become president with only 22% of the popular vote. And that's very clearly not fair. And a year or so before all that, in the UK, we had the chance to change our voting system and we didn't do it. But you can't expect things to work well if, you've become Prime Minister or President, but most of the people don't want you to be Prime Minister or President. The third thing to consider is what your democracy actually looks like in terms of, are you voting a particular person into a particular office, or are you just deciding as a populace directly what it is you want to do? Because at the moment we vote people into offices. An alternative, and I'm not commenting here on whether it's better or worse, is that you could vote directly on policies. And again, that would require that we know enough about the issues to make informed decisions about those policies. But you need to arrive at the best decision when considering that. Number 4. This one could be controversial because I think it's one of the big hurdles that we fall at. If you look at the politicians that become popular, it tends to be people with very strong convictions, very firm beliefs. I would argue that's actually counterproductive when we're talking about a democracy. We tend to get behind people that agree with our beliefs. But really what we should be doing is getting behind people who make the best decisions for our society. They need to come up with the most effective policies for governing our society. And in order to do this, they can't be tied down to a set of preconceived notions, a set of beliefs that they adhere to against, all opposition. It might be inspiring and, emotionally rewarding to watch someone talk passionately about what they believe. But that's just the emotional part of us interfering with the logical part of us. You'll know what that politician's going to do, but you'll also know that they're not going to change their mind, even when the situation calls for it. And flip that over and you're talking about politicians that flip-flop, and you look at how that constantly gets used as an attack. Another word for flip-flopping is changing your mind, maybe to suit new evidence that's come to light, maybe because of greater insight into the situation. The idea that that's a bad thing defies belief. Now, there are perfectly legitimate reasons why we want people with strong convictions, and that's that, we want people to do, once they're in office, what they've promised to do before they're in office. We don't want people saying one thing and doing another. But there's a number of problems with that. First of all, if you want to be president or if you want to be prime minister, you will do or say anything that will get you to that goal. And then once you've achieved that goal, you will say or do anything that you want to do within the confines of your own political power. You would still have to appease your cabinet and your party, or in America, you have to appease the Senate and the House of Representatives. But within those limitations, you can do whatever you want. The other problem is that new information might come to light when you get into office. A greater understanding of the problems around a certain issue might become more apparent to you. And as such, some of the promises that you made before you got elected, it might not be at all possible to keep. Or, and there's a perfect textbook example of that here in the UK, you might end up in a coalition with another party, and you might have made many radical promises before the election and you wouldn't be able to keep any of them because the other party has most, if not all, of the power. And if the example that I'm thinking of, and I'm thinking of the coalition that exists at the moment, the Tories and the Lib Dems, if that's anything to go by, the public isn't going to sympathise with your position. And then of course there's lobbying, where the entire point of democracy is just swept away, because the person with the most money and influence, or the corporation with the most money and influence, gets to essentially run the government. And even if most of the politicians can be disciplined on their own to say, I'm not accepting this money, it's wrong, it defeats the point of a democracy, they might still have no choice. They might have a huge debt crisis. They might need every penny they can get off of those lobbyists. And if they don't accept that money, or if they do and then don't do what it is they want, they're unlikely to come back. They'll instead get behind your enemies. Or if they have as much money as they presumably do, they can just find other ways to destroy your reputation. As I keep thinking about all these issues, I tend to end up leaning further and further away from the whole concept of a democracy. Is it likely that politicians in a political party with very firmly established beliefs are going to do something that calls for defying those beliefs for the greater good? Is it likely that the average person in today's society who is either looking for a job or already has one and also has to worry about a family and many other things, that they're going to spend the time researching all of those policies, looking into all of those candidates, and making, even gathering the information that it takes to have an informed opinion on the issues? Is it likely that everyone is going to teach themselves about logical fallacies and train themselves to spot them so that they can see through the constant use of them by politicians in speeches, in debates, just all over the place? Not to mention the self-discipline it takes to examine your own preconceived notions, your own political beliefs. Is it likely that huge multinational corporations are ever not going to use their clearly advantageous situation to take advantage of the game, rig things in their favour? And my answer to all of these questions, as things currently stand, is no. But at the same time, is there any workable alternative? We've tried monarchies, we've tried dictatorships, and by try I mean not really had a choice, we've been given them. And as a result of considering the alternatives, many people will make the argument that democracy might not be perfect, and might not even be good, but it's the best we can come up with at the current moment. And I've always seen arguments like that as a cop-out, as an excuse not to think. What the greatest minds in history had in common is that they didn't see any idea as being sacred, as being beyond being challenged. They didn't settle for adequate for now solutions. They engaged in a ruthless, constant pursuit of better solutions at all costs. They weren't afraid to challenge the most basic, unchallenged assumptions about how things work in order to come up with those solutions. And many times they found those solutions. So with those facts in mind, I want to pose to you the following question. At this point in time, not in the future, not in the past, what do you think is the best system of government that can work for right now? What is the absolute best possible way of organising a society? And you can be as detailed or as brief as you like. But I want you to really think about this and not just go to the idea of, well, you know what, I agree, democracy is the best we can come up with. At least provide reasons for that if you're going to do it. And it goes without saying that to properly answer this question, you will almost certainly have to challenge preconceived notions and political beliefs that you currently hold to. But either way, doing this will make us better skeptics. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.